My name is Robin Lee. Welcome to Buzz on the Bluffs, Vicksburg, Mississippi's Community Insight Program. We'll be taking a look at people, places, and events that impact our community. Thanks for joining us. Okay, one of the things I noticed in here were some copies of handwritten notes that she had sent you, and she always signed his name. This one she signed from Preacher and Margaret, and this one she'd signed your father and mother. And I'm assuming you have more of these. This is just a sample.
Yeah, it's just a sampling. Yeah, I mean, over this period of 18 years, I really became quite close to them, and they became really close to me. And so after a while, most of my travels during the summer because that's when I'm, free from school. But then, I'd start to write or, send postcards or call and check in on them. And then Margaret, and then at Christmas, I'd send Christmas cards and Christmas gifts. So she'd always send a thank you note and tell me how, little note just like those.
Yeah,
tell me how
very
how
sweet.
She was the sweetest person in the
I mean,
world.
they obviously just adored you.
Yeah, well, it would be hard to know what the Reverend thought because he's always so, kind of exuberant and boisterous, and he delighted in giving me a hard time. So he.
Well, that's a sign of
yeah,
affection.
Yeah, it is a sign of affection, but it's really kind of. But she's just the sweetest, most lovely person I ever met. So.
How did they meet?
I think a couple years before that, she had lost her husband that she had built a grocery store with, and he had actually gotten murdered in the grocery store. So she was a widow, and then he, for years, lived in Detroit and worked in one of the automotive plants. So, and somehow, never explained to me, but somehow he decided to leave Detroit and come back to Vicksburg this is after years and years. So he had been overseas in the South Pacific and had been in Georgia and then eventually in Detroit. So somehow he came back, and then I think he heard about this available widows, and he started, visiting.
Yes.
And I think he said he had this vision that he was supposed to woo her and then transform the grocery store. Two purposes. One was to make a palace for her, and the other one was to make this kind of roadside church, so he could spread the gospel. So.
And he certainly did.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So
you couldn't step foot on the property without hearing the gospel, right?
Oh, yeah. And it was kind of funny because I was there often enough that I'd see different people's reactions to it. And a lot of times he would take people into the bus, which was then the church, and by that point very elaborately decorated, and he'd bring them in there, and then have them sit in the pews or the bus seats, and at that point he would start preaching, but he was in the aisle between the chairs, so he was essentially blocking any way of
any
exit. Any exits. And some people would be like, "Oh, this is cool and this is fine," and you could see other people because that's where he would really get carried away. So he always read the 23rd Psalm, and then he would break out into a song about "I have a robe, you have a robe," and he'd start dancing.
And you have a segment in here with all of that in it.
So at that point, he was like sweating profusely and like pretty wild, and so people would be like, some people would be like, "Oh, this is exciting," and other people would be like, "How do I get out? How do I get out of here?" So it was fun to see that. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the whole reason. As soon as he saw a car pull up along the side of the road, he'd be out there like, "Come on in, let me." And of course, it was nonstop diatribe at that point. So.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite picture?
Oh, no, I've never thought about that. It would be hard to pick a favorite.
Yeah.
So.
I know that you were, she died in 2009, and then he had to go he was kind of in failing health at that point,
Yes,
and had to go into a nursing home, and you continued to come and visit him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he died in 2012, is that correct? And you actually got into the house long after they were gone from living there.
Well, actually, it would be most of those pictures were from he was still alive and in the convalescent home, I think. And yeah, and then she had willed the grocery to the Cool Springs not Methodist
Missionary
Church,
Baptist Church.
Missionary Baptist Church. So so through the deacon there is a wonderful man named Frank Johnson. And I met Frank, and he'd open up and let me in, and we, of course, we talk and have a good time. And then he said, "I'll be back in a couple hours." And then, and he's absolutely, like I say, just really sweet, wonderful man. So that's how I got access and made those pictures.
Yeah, so you got some pictures of parts of the building you had never been in before.
Yeah. So it's
because they lived. It was the grocery, but they lived there.
Yeah, as you went back, you kind of went into the more kind of private home spaces. So yeah, some of those spaces I had never been in, and at that point it had already been ransacked and kind of torn up, and so it was totally dark. So I'm like going around with a flashlight and my camera and trying to sometimes holding my flashlight with my knees to try to illuminate what I'm photographing.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was very, very powerful and kind of disturbing experience in a lot of ways to, just see how abused the space was by that point.
I thought this picture was interesting. It looks like the closet, which is kind of a weird picture to take of somebody's closet. But what I loved about it is just a single light bulb. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I don't even know if it's really a closet. It's just an area with a bar and very few clothes in it. Of course, I know they weren't living there at that point, but they were people that lived kind of austerely.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Actually, if you look carefully at the photographs, you'll see that over that period of time, the Reverend only had a few changes of clothes. So yeah, they lived. They were always clean and pressed and all that, and so he's very meticulous about that. But yeah, they lived very marginally. And
I would say simply, but there was really nothing simple about this structure that they lived in.
No.
Their lifestyle was a pretty simple lifestyle. Mm-hmm. This place was not simple.
Oh no.
And I see this one is the red heart that you mentioned with the white. Is that a heart on the inside?
Another heart.
And that was symbolic to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the spiritual heart of Jesus is the white one, and then the red one just symbolized the irregular heart, the physical heart pumping the blood. So again, he had everything had symbolism and had a story behind it.
Was this when he was already in the nursing home?
Yeah, that was in the nursing home.
And he was 93 or 94 when he died?
97.
97.
So,
and
yes.
how old was Miss Margaret?
I think 94. So.
Was she older than he was?
No, they were the same age.
Oh, were they?
So, and I regret I didn't get down for her funeral. I heard about, because I have enough friends that, all of a sudden I start getting emails. And I was prepared to come, and then there were like torrential rains. And I thought, and it's a long way to drive in pounding rain, so I was afraid.
Right. So do you come back here much anymore?
Let's see, I was here last year and visited and photographed, even though, at that point I knew what pictures were going to be in the book. It's just something to do for myself, and I'll get out there before I leave and photograph.
I was about
again.
to ask you that. Do you go out there every time you come here?
Yeah, so it's getting kind of sad compared to what it was.
Yeah,
so,
it's really deteriorating. Well, this is going to run well after the book signing, but you are in Vicksburg for the book signing down at Lorelei Books.
Yes.
And even though we'll be, by the time we run this, that'll be over and done with. I've been down there and seen the book down there, so the book is available, and it is just fascinating. I really hope people will come and buy this and thoroughly enjoy it. I've looked through it so many times since I got it that I'm already starting to have some of my pages get a little bit worn, but it's just fascinating, Bruce.
Well, thank you.
You just had the eye. Maybe you didn't know at the time that you, back in 1994 when you showed up down here, that you had hit upon something that would later come in this way, but you're very gifted,
Well, thank
very
you. Thank you.
talented, and have used it in such a great way.
Well, I mean, for me, part of the experience was, motivation was A, to make pictures, but B, the other part really became, kind of staying connected to them.
Yes.
And I realized that was a very, very unique experience, a very special. I mentioned growing up on the East Coast, and I grew up in the days of segregation, so the whole idea of having, adopted African American parents was like, oh, this is a new part of my life, and it's a very special part for me.
Did either of them have any children?
I don't believe she did, and I think the Reverend had. Well, I've met his daughter at least, and she's probably at least my age, and she lives in Brooklyn. So
New York.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, and I think she was probably born and raised in Detroit. I might be extrapolating here. I'm just trying to,
But she's still alive.
Yeah, she's still alive, and I by chance met her and her husband one time when I was visiting the Reverend at the convalescent home, and they're kind of like, who's this guy?
Who's the white guy?
Sometimes if I were there, the Reverend or Margaret would say, oh, Bruce West is here taking pictures. So she knew who I was. And so since then, we've stayed in touch a couple times, and so that's been good. So.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for sharing all this with us. And my last question is always, is there anything I didn't ask you that you want to be sure and tell us about? I don't want to miss anything that you think is really good.
Oh, okay. Let me think about that for a second. Well, I guess for me, at some point I realized that the Reverend was really amazing. I mean, both of them were totally amazing people, and very, very special. And I think I talked about that in my essay too. The idea that they created something. They used to have visitors from all over the world come. So and here are these people. We talked already about their economically kind of very simple lifestyle, and just getting by, and yet they had visitors, seemingly constantly from all over. I mean, I'd be there a couple times. There were people from Germany, and one time there was a journalist from Britain, and they kind of used to joke about some of the Japanese and Chinese visitors that they would have. But anyway, people from all over the world came to visit them, and I thought that was so amazing that, even though they were, constrained in many ways, they still kind of had created this place that, people from all over the world came to, and this kind of incredible folk art environment,
Well, one thing that came through so clearly in your essay was he was a man who lived by his convictions. He knew that God had divined this for him and to him, and he lived by it.
Oh, yeah.
And I would imagine some people could look at this and go, wow, these people are crazy.
Yeah.
But he knew what his conviction was, and he remained focused and true to it.
Oh, at all expense. He worked very hard on this. He devoted all his energy, all his finances to it. So yeah, he's very much committed to it. And I guess that's the other part as I think about it, is I just wonder whether there'll ever be people like this again.
Yeah.
It's like, it's hard to say that, and like, well, how do I know? But
Right.
but,
when God calls you to it,
Yeah.
and you're obedient, then of course there would be.
yeah, so-
Right.
Well, it's still pretty extreme. So
Well, it's a little eccentric,
yeah.
but interesting.
Yeah, and just the faith of in his own abilities, that he could take just these really, really simple things, old egg cartons or,
Meat packing trays.
Yeah, and put them together.
Well, Bruce, I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I appreciate you being here today. And,
Well, it's great fun.
now tell us a little bit about the book. Who has
It's published by University of Mississippi Press.
Okay.
So it would be available through them.
Okay.
And then locally in Vicksburg, it's available at Lorelei Books.
Yes, and that's where we want people to buy it.
Yes, oh yeah.
We like to shop local, right?
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah. She runs a great place.
Yes,
there.
and she has a great spot for it down there in that little nook where you sit and read, and I saw it over there on that bookshelf.
So it's available there, and then I'll be doing book signings in Jackson in a couple days. Also at Turner Books in Greenwood.
Oh, good. Well, you have a busy schedule.
Yeah.
So, well, I would encourage people to go and buy this book. It's not real expensive. It's
No,
worth more than what the cost is.
Well, thank you,
Just is
yeah.
fascinating. Your photography is remarkable.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so
I had a
much
great
for-
subject, so that makes
Yes,
it easy. so.
I'm sure it does make it a lot easier. So, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.